Hi everyone, welcome back to Kamau Mahakoe's Author Central. So I'm going to be continuing the reading of There's Something You Should Know About Leroy. The last video I think I left off just one page left before the ending of chapter 7. So I'm actually going to continue reading that last page of chapter 7 and then continue with chapter 8 and then we'll take it from there, right? So last page of chapter 7. Prudence kept her eyes fixed on Mrs. Blake. Her hair was done in a dry perm that curled just touching her shoulders, modest makeup and stunning diamond earrings, and a thread-thin white gold chain that tapered below the curved neck of her blouse, hiding a pendant that you knew was selected just for her. She wore a wedding band, which she seemed to flaunt because her hands were always moving, even when they didn't need to. She stood with the poise and self-assurance of a professional woman. Okay, this time I will be a man of my word, I promise, Mrs. Blake, he lied. She wagged her index finger at him, a hint of future chastisement for the promise they both knew he would not keep. Then she turned and walked off with the grace of a supermodel laying claim to the runway. Back to you, Miss Prudence, I really want. I know that woman, said Prudence, ignoring him. Well, I should think you would know her. She's the new administrative assistant. She's been working here for 3 months. Prudence, she's Mrs. Hyacinth Blake. No, it's the first time I'm seeing her here, but I've seen her somewhere else. Yes, that face, I've seen her somewhere else. I thought we artists were the ones with the vivid imagination. He released his trademark sinister chuckle. I doubt you've seen her walking on the road. She drives a Mercedes-Benz. Now, back to our discussion. Oh shit, I know where, uttered Prudence, covering her mouth. I wonder where Prudence saw this lady before. I wonder. Okay, chapter 8. When Prudence was a little girl, around 7 or 8, her mother would sometimes take her to the home where she worked as a helper in Norbrook. At the time, they lived in Kingston. They would take the bus to Constant Spring and then walk about a half-mile up the hill. The Jaspers lived in a sprawling 8-bedroom mansion, though there were only 4 of them living there at the time. Mr. Jasper was a pilot who was hardly ever there, or if he was there, he spent the time in hiding, it seemed. Mrs. Jasper was an attorney at law and a senior partner at the law firm Dane, Wentworth and Jasper, and was on at least a dozen boards, and had received as many honorary awards. They had 2 little girls who both attended a preparatory school that Prudence kept forgetting the name of, though they made a point of reminding her. Samantha was 10, and Patrice was 8, and Mrs. Jasper was done having children. She declared it to the universe every day, lest the universe forget. Too taxing on the mind and body, she had realized too late. If her husband wanted more, that was his bad luck. He didn't. He tended to want whatever Mrs. Jasper wanted. These 2 had given her enough gray hairs before time, triggering a lifetime addiction to hair dyes and painkillers. Still, she had been a dutiful mother to them. She saw to it that they had everything they needed and many things that they didn't need for good measure. Mrs. Jasper had sorted out her career and carved out her position in the world long before she even considered dating. She had sat Mr. Jasper down while he was still a doting bachelor, trying feverishly to woo her, and she had told him what was what. Career first, unbridled sex later. So by the time the first child had arrived, the Jaspers had all the material possessions they figured one needed in the world, and enough money to buy more later. They paid for nannies to bathe and feed the little ones, chauffeurs to shuttle them to kindergarten, and later to ballet, tennis practice, swimming lessons, Latin lessons, and chess practice. The girls were sent to learn how to play the violin, the flute, and the harmonica. A retired old music teacher came twice per week to teach them the piano, of which they had a very imposing one conveniently sprawled in their living room. One of their living rooms. They had three. And the family photos that they took in any one of those living rooms could comfortably sit among the pages of the high-class house and home magazines that Mrs. Jasper sometimes read as she sipped Chardonnay on a Saturday evening. So Mrs. Jasper was a 45-year-old lawyer who was very busy. Her helper, Maud, had doubled as nanny from the day the first girl had been born at the Andrews Memorial Hospital and taken home in silken blankets. Okay, they had been cotton blankets, but they were of the finest, softest, fluffiest kind. And when Maud told the story when she had gotten back home, it sounded much better to say that the blankets had been made of silk. In any case, they could just as easily have been. When Prudence first entered the mansion, which was called Jasper Place, she was amazed at the sprawling lawns. She didn't know the word manicure then, but later whenever she heard the word, she always thought of that acre of carpet grass and the hedges of hibiscus and oleander, the rose bushes by the gate, and the fountain that spewed water effortlessly, soothingly. 2 poinciana trees gave shade to the lawn and lent a dark, wonderful atmosphere of privacy, added to the dainty tint of the blinds and the lovely lace curtains that guarded the tempered glass doors and windows. A gardener was fussing about at the side of the house, talking to someone who, Prudence gathered, from the splash of the water and from what was being said, was busy cleaning a swimming pool from the back. There was the sound of several dogs barking with very heavy throats, a sign of pedigree. Prudence hoped they were kennelled or at least chained. She had heard that rich people tended not to chain their dogs, a deterrent to pedestrians who were more than likely poor. In the foyer, Prudence stood for 3 solid minutes, just staring up at the vaulted ceilings that seemed to be at least 10 feet high, the winding staircase that seemed to lead up to heaven, the carpeted floors that seemed to have made some kind of pact with the walls to keep things elegant but gorgeous. This coordination and synchrony could not have happened by accident. Many plans had been drawn up, ripped, drawn up, revisited, perfected, finalized, executed. Millions upon millions in hours, energy, and dollars had been spent. Come Prue got to go to work. Have to fix breakfast before Mrs. J wake up. Come stay with me in the kitchen. It was a Saturday morning, very early. Only the hired help were awake, at least awake and about. Maud kept shooing the gardener, Mr. Lawrence, out of the kitchen. He wanted to help himself to coffee, then sandwiches, then cake. Then, half-hour later, he smelled bacon and wanted some of that. And since he was there, might as well finish off the leftovers from dinner. The Jaspers wouldn't want it anyway. Rich people didn't need leftovers. They were always buying more new stuff. The last time he came in saying that he smelled biscuits, Maud had the broomstick waiting. "I didn't know biscuits had smell," exclaimed Maud, hissing her teeth in typical no-nonsense cook style. She had had enough practice with the men she had lived with. "Prue, sit here and eat this sandwich and drink some cocoa tea. I'm going to go serve breakfast out front." She left and re-entered the kitchen 4 times, carrying out platters of bacon, eggs, sandwiches, oats porridge, coffee, tea, cake, orange juice, and several other items. If Prudence had tried to ask for all of those items at once at home, Maud would have said, "You want to get colic, Pitney?" Apparently, rich people didn't get colic or had found the cure. After breakfast, Prudence was given a formal introduction, which was simply her mother saying, "Miss J, this is my last one, Prudence, the wash belly." And Mrs. Jasper looking amused and a bit condescending and saying, "Nice girl, bright eyes. You're finished now, right, Maud? No more after this one?" And Maud would be blushing and avoiding Mrs. Jasper's eyes, knowing that she and Benjamin had devious plans to the contrary. "Children do nothing but destroy a woman's body," declared Mrs. Jasper, in a room of 5 females, including her 2 daughters. "I've instructed my girls to have no more than 1 child each, if so many, and not before age 35. "I love children, Miss J. They are a blessing." Maud patted Prudence's head. Prudence beamed. Everyone said she was Maud's favorite, and a wee bit spoiled. Mrs. Jasper snickered and went back to read her daily paper. They were by this time in the living room. "I guess they're fine if you're so inclined, but I think I had 1 too many." Patrice, the youngest, flinched. A yellow Honda pulled into the driveway and honked once, daintily, as if not to arouse the ire of the residents. "Girls, Mrs. Thorny is here," said Mrs. Jasper in a melodious sing-song voice, though the girls were right beside her and had seen the car enter, as she did. It was 9 o'clock, piano lesson time. The girls had been freshly bathed and powdered and were wearing floral halterback dresses that smelled like the roses that were littered across them. Their hair was held up with bandeau and were bundled at the back with 1 ribbon. They looked like twins, uniformed. Piano class uniform, Prudence thought. Mrs. Jasper herself had been freshly pruned and was even wearing makeup, a habit she couldn't break, not even on Saturday, the most casual of days, and locked in at home, the most casual of places. She had gorgeous black skin, a trait she had seen to it to pass on to her daughters, as it was her passion to ensure that they got only the best. Prudence imagined her at the marketplace of wherever it was that babies got their traits, haggling with whomever it was that was in charge of those matters, insisting that Samantha got 2 pounds of this and that Patrice got 3 dozen of that, and handpicking exactly what she wanted her babies to have, and letting them know that she had the money to pay for it. And be quick about it too. Mrs. Jasper was that kind of woman. So with a complexion such as hers, one was duty bound to wear shorts on a weekend. Mrs. Jasper was not one to shirk her responsibilities. She had on a comfortable pair of navy blue shorts and a sky blue tube-top blouse. Mr. Lawrence would be finding many excuses to come into the house today. She sneered at the thought. Workers should know their places, really. Today, as with every other day of her life, Mrs. Jasper had piles of papers to sort through, 2 huge books to read, newspaper clippings that she had borrowed from the library to dig through for clues for the case she was working on. Don't let her shorts fool you. Today, she meant business. Mrs. Thorny, too, was a woman of action. She always got straight down to the matter at hand. Girls, did you practice your keys? She asked sternly, knowing that the answer would be a resounding, yes, Mrs. Thorny. They didn't mess with her. They sat on either side of Mrs. Thorny on a long padded stool that ran the length of the piano. They sat upright as they had been taught, back straight and fingers delicately resting on the fringe of the keyboard. They had been under Mrs. Thorny's tutelage since Samantha was 3 years old, and Patrice had joined in when she had gotten to that age. By now, they were very adept and could almost play by ear, or by memory of having seen the score but once. They handled the keys with great dexterity and finesse. Maud was always delighted when music class came around. She wasn't so keen on the classical fanfare, but luckily for her, neither was Mrs. Thorny, who only taught the classics as a matter of principle, but was a woman of improvisation. Very surprising for her pompous airs and conservative facade. Prudence stood at the kitchen door and watched, or more specifically, listened, as the girls ran through their basic keys for the sake of formality, then delved into a medley of all-time favorites and brand new gems. Brand new to Prudence. She was flabbergasted, enthralled. She knew there and then what she wanted to become. Mom, how much for a piano? She asked Maud on their way back down the hill. 1 leg, 2 arms, 3 kidneys, and half a bladder, her mother responded with the most serious face ever, as if actually working out the calculations in her head. I'll throw in 1 leg and a kidney. Don't know how much your father will give. What? You thinking of buying a piano? Prudence took the hint. She reflected for a while. Boy, if I could get to play one. At least, I'm sure I know how to play it already. I just need to touch one. You ever touch a piano? Maud laughed. They were back in Constant Spring and were on the bus home. Never touched one, but I will, replied the 8-year-old Prudence, as if in a trance. From that day on, she spoke of nothing else and wanted nothing more fervently. On their way back up the hill next Saturday, Prudence raced ahead of her mother, the drumsticks she called legs quivering under the steepness of the hill. Mind one of them big dogs rush out at you, cautioned her mother breathlessly, trying to keep up. Sometimes they loose and sit out on the road. Them rich people don't expect too many walkfoots to be roaming up these parts. Mainly car-driving people. Prudence was terrified of the huge Alsatians and Dobermans that she saw through the closed gates as she passed. Their thunderous barks were a sure sign that even the muscles in their throats were more powerful than the mongrels that scampered about back home. She walked carefully but quickly past, while at the same time formulating a mental strategy in the unfortunate event that one of the dogs was waiting for her along the side of the road. The strategy was, run for your life. Don't run, Prue. Mind dog. They chase you more when you run. Maud reminded herself to do some jumping jacks when she got home. The hill was starting to get the better of her. Prudence paced the kitchen floor while the girls daintily played with their breakfast. She wanted to shove the bacon down their throats and throw the porridge out the window. 9 o'clock, it seemed, had decided not to come this morning, or perhaps had already left. Prudence looked at the clock. She couldn't read analog. Math wasn't her favorite. What time now, Moon? Prudence, is still just past 7. You asked 10 minutes ago. Sit and mind you strain your eyes looking for that car. Mrs. Thorny finally arrived. It was about time. Prudence stood at the kitchen door and watched, listened to the lessons. She closed her eyes and smiled. Maud shook her head. Maud decided now was the time to put her plan into action. She had been scheming all along. She took Prudence by the hand and led her into the living room, the one with the grand piano. Mrs. Thorny, I wonder if you would mind if my little Prudence sat in on some piano lessons. I already got the okay from Mrs. J, and I'll pay for the classes each week. Before Mrs. Thorny could respond, Maud led Prudence over to the chair. Girls, scuttle over a bit. Let my little Prudence sit beside you. She barely takes up any space. While saying this, she cleared a patch for Prudence on the bench. Mrs. Thorny raised her eyebrows and stared down at the girl from above the rim of her glasses. The nerve of these servants. Each generation of them was getting more and more presumptuous. Mrs. Thorny cut her eyes at Prudence. She would have a word with Mrs. Jasper later. No sense embarrassing the child on account of her mother's impropriety. She proceeded with the lessons, with 2 girls on one side of her and 1 girl on the other. One of the girls was grinning from ear to ear. The other 2 were trying to figure out what just happened. Next week, Prudence was back at the piano and was playing better than the others. I don't believe it, shrieked Mrs. Thorny. These girls have been playing since they were knee-high to a grasshopper, and this little rat just started last week. She's really, really good. Maud felt the veins in her head about to rupture. She sat down. She was giddy with pride. Prudence had music in her blood. Her daddy used to play in a band in the 60s. The child was always singing and finding things around the house to bang and beat. Her fingers were always looking for something to tap on. She knew the words of a song within seconds of hearing it. She sang with depth and feeling. This is our little secret, Maud warned her. Don't tell anyone at home. Maud could not bring herself to tell Benjamin about Prudence's piano lessons. Not that he had anything against piano lessons per se, but she was sure he would not approve of her relinquishing a quarter of her wages each month to an old retired snob, so that Prudence could sit with 2 young snobs and press keys. It wouldn't sit well with him. They were struggling to pay the bills as it was. She hoped he wouldn't notice that the morning porridge was thinner, the stew was scantier, and the slices of bread on his plate were fewer. Some men would have been quick to spot the rake, but Benjamin was a humble man. He ate what he was given, without complaint. He figured if his wife was up to something, it wasn't something bad. He felt he knew her well enough. But this was a sacrifice Maud was more than willing to make. Poor mothers wanted the very best for their children too, just like rich mothers did. She had the foresight to warn Prudence to always keep her fingernails clean and presentable for piano lessons, so as never to give Mrs. Thorny reason to shun her. She powdered her daughters on Saturday mornings with baby powder that she had bought downtown and dabbed a little essence behind Prudence's ears in case Mrs. Thorny had occasion to lean in during one of her musical raptures. The clandestine lessons continued for 2 more years, when Mrs. Thorny migrated to England and the girls graduated to other lessons in life. Prudence had mastered the piano. Mrs. Thorny herself had called Prudence a prodigy, and Mrs. Thorny's opinion mattered because she had taught and worked with the best. She had the pictures to prove it. By then too, Prudence had started high school and her Saturdays were packed with homework and chores. It was one of these same chores, as it turned out, that led her to the discovery of something even more magnificent. She had been sent to clear out some old boxes that had been stacked in the back room for years, gathering cobwebs and possibly scorpions. She was fine with the cobwebs. Scorpions were another matter. No scorpions not in there, Prue. Just some old junk your father was been holding on to. Just put the boxes out in the yard so he can pick out what can keep and throw out what need to throw out. Prudence did as she was told, all the while vigilant for any black thing seen scurrying from under the boxes. She had on her thick-soled PE sneakers, good for stomping. She carried out 7 cardboard boxes. Maud was right. Most of it was junk. Let's skip the sorting process, thought Prudence. I think I hear the garbage truck coming. Her father's paraphernalia from his scar days, outfits, hats, belts, even old kick-me-kill-me shoes from when he used to perform on stage. Hey, look, a guitar, shouted Prudence. Whoa, my old friend, cheered Benjamin. Bring her come to Papa. Let me teach you how to play. And that was the beginning of the beginning. An old friend given a new lease on life, just in time to be solace to a young girl who in 2 years would lose her father, her uncle, and her bearings. The guitar was her anchor through her teenage years. She was a feisty tomboy who was just as eager to beat up the boys as she was to play marbles with them. If the bigger ones tried to bully her, she would wave the guitar threateningly at them and they would back off, not so much out of fear as out of amusement. End of chapter 8 and end of this video. Please join me in the next video as I continue reading from There's Something You Should Know About Leroy. You need to find out what is Leroy hiding from us. What is it we need to know about Leroy? So I'm going to continue chapter 9